Hey guys, and welcome to the channel. You're probably wondering why me, Fazan, is actually presenting the boxing video. It's because I just felt like it. No, it's because Mohammad does all the live streaming. He's the head honcho for boxing live streams. But once in a while, occasionally, I think I should probably dip my toe in the boxing world. And I thought it was definitely worth talking about because Manny Pacquiao lost over the weekend. And myself and Mohammad did the watch along for it, and we didn't just watch that, to be fair. So I think before we get into that, because that's going to be pretty much the whole topic of this video, I think it's just quick notes about the two fights we watched. I mean, was it Victor Ortiz, Robert Guerrero?
Yeah, it was.
Two guys who hadn't fought for 2 and 3 years respectively. It's pretty much what we expected, I thought, in terms of them gassing out later on. But it was exciting whilst it lasted.
Yeah, it was a good fight. It was nice to see some OGs in the welterweight division having a fight that they should have probably had a while back. I did think Ortiz would have won the fight. He didn't in the end. It was Guerrero. We didn't see some sort of dramatic knockout finish to the fight. It went to points in the end, and looked like Guerrero did enough to win on points. To be honest, he was just a bit more crisper in terms of the shots that he was landing. But no, very nice exchanges, especially in the early to mid parts of the fight. It was good to see. It was a good fight overall. But certainly, I assume neither of them are looking to challenge for any titles, and they seem to be definitely past their prime, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be seeing them in with Errol Spence or Terence Crawford or anything like that. I think they're more. It's funny. I actually heard another channel. It's Adeola Depot. It used to be called Boxing Talk with Ade, but he's now actually a presenter on DAZN. But I've watched his channel. I've actually been the guy whose channel I was on. He basically now is a presenter for DAZN as well, but still has his YouTube channel. And he was saying that he can see those two becoming like gatekeepers, basically, if they want to carry on boxing. And maybe, for example, like someone like Conor Benn, who's going to be fighting in a couple of weeks, who's actually on the 4th of September show that you're going to be covering against Granado. So that's a really, really good fight. And he's exciting. He's a welterweight coming through. He's young and don't quite know where his ceiling is, but he's very exciting. And that's kind of like a good test for him.
Power as well, Conor Benn.
Yeah. He's... Have you seen that skit actually of him? The undefeated. I'll send it to you after this. Actually, it's the Undefeated podcast. It's another boxing channel. They're substantially kind of bigger than us at the moment. They've been around for quite a long time. They're two comedians. But they're very big into their boxing, and they actually have live call-in shows on Mondays. So I've been on and talked to them and stuff. They're nice guys, but they got invited to DAZN and they've done a skit on Conor Benn and how he acts. I think you'll find it funny, so I'll send it over. And actually, Conor Benn retweeted it and found it funny as well. So they're taking the mick out of him, but he kind of saw the funny side of it.
He's got a good sense of humor.
Yeah, and Eddie Hearn as well. So Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn both have shared it and stuff. So it's quite cool. So they've kind of become famous from that, and it's kind of helped them out, which is cool as well. But yeah, anyways, on to the other fight before we go on to Pacquiao. Magsayo, who is the Pacquiao prodigy, I guess you might say, at featherweight. I think it was a WBA title eliminator for featherweight, and he was facing a very experienced fighter in Saya, who has kind of been there, done it, and this was the step up fight for Magsayo. Dropped Saya in the first round, and we thought, oh, hold on, when we tuned in, Magsayo was really on the offensive. Looked like he was trying to get him out. Saya, though, his head was clear, kind of a la Andy Ruiz, Anthony Joshua, after the first knockdown. Andy Ruiz, his senses were all there. And then Saya came back into it, knocked him down later on in the fight. And we thought Saya was actually winning that fight. Magsayo looked pretty, I don't know, just a bit spent. The body shot, the kind of body work that Saya was putting on Magsayo was just insane, I think, throughout the whole fight. And it took a toll later on. Yeah. And Magsayo really, for me, and I think for you, we had him, I think it was something like 4-3, 5-3 down the cards. And then next thing you know, he just comes up with this unbelievable right hand, which is just like an eraser, and just knocks Saya out completely cold on the floor. He actually tried to get up and they had to put him back down because he was just completely out of it.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
what a shot. Yeah, no, exactly. You've painted the picture well of that fight. I mean, we did have Seo winning on the cards, especially during the kind of mid stage of that fight. Um, Magseo though came back with an amazing shot there, and I guess we the fight, it was potentially unlikely the fight was going to go the distance anyway. I think both of them had more than 50% knockout percentage ratio, so it could have been the case that this fight was going to end with someone getting knocked out. We didn't really expect it to come from Magseo though, because he did look pretty spent as a result of the shots that he sustained from Saya. He was coming under a lot of pressure. So no, I mean, he must be very happy. It's certainly a very important fight for him, and a true test compared to his previous opponents. I don't think he's been in such a difficult situation before, and he still retains, I believe, an undefeated record, which is excellent for him. I'm sure he would have learned a lot from that fight, and maybe he will have to kind of focus more on his defensive ability so that he can avoid taking a lot of those, for example, body shots and getting knocked down himself. So very good fight for him. He's definitely had a really important experience in trying to weather the storm, and yeah, fair play to him. I'm sure that Filipino crowd was very happy, but of course, by the end of the night, the crowd wasn't as happy, I would imagine, given the final fight, which I'm sure we're going to turn on to.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say they were crying, but I think they actually he got cheered out of the ring, Pacquiao, as you'd expect, right? Because he gave
Of
it his all.
course,
But
yeah.
yeah, interesting because this potentially, obviously inadvertently, might be kind of the passing of the torch in the Philippines in terms of
Hmm.
from Pacquiao, who they would have expected to win and potentially have maybe one or two more fights, but and obviously we're going to go into it in more detail, but he potentially could retire after losing to Yordenis Ugas, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And Maxeo is the prodigy who's coming through. He's unbeaten and has this excitement around him. And we weren't super familiar with him, but I think we will definitely be keeping tabs on him now because
Yeah.
look, he's definitely got frailties, but as the most fighters when they're coming up, especially when they've got that type of power and kind of hand speed and
Mm.
are very aggressive, like you normally do, leave yourself open in some instances, and he will be ironing those out. But he's still very young and he's exciting, so he'll definitely be a pull. So interesting to see how he goes now after that Saya fight as well. Yeah, let's touch upon the main fight. I mean, Pacquiao Ugas, I think it was one of those fights, right? Which I remember we talked about it, and I said I think it's a 50-50 fight. And I
Yeah.
think you said, and which a lot of people did say, to be fair, is I think Pacquiao is going to have too much for him.
Yeah.
And I think maybe sometimes when we think of Pacquiao, we get a little bit nostalgic and think of the Pacquiao who knocked out Hatton and
Prime Pacquiao. Yeah.
yeah, and beat Cotto and beat Oscar De La Hoya. These are huge wins, and we'll go through his resume actually later as well because I think we have to. It's just incredible. But he hadn't fought for 2 years. He's 42 years of age. Yes, a really impressive win against Keith Thurman, but the inactivity and the real, let's be honest, the focus. Yes, he still gives everything in camp, etc. But he's at the moment a senator in the Philippines. His
Mm.
focus is divided, and he is at the end of his career.
Mm.
Were you very shocked with how the fight went?
Um, if you had asked me before the fight, I would
Mm.
have been shocked. But whilst I was watching the fight progress, I think it became clearer to both of us that
Yeah,
Pacquiao was losing on points. And we, despite the fact that I think both of us are, Pacquiao fanboys,
yeah,
compared to our fanboy nature for Ugas, which is limited. I
yeah,
think we ourselves would have been biased in favor of Pacquiao anyway.
yeah.
But even us, even we, we had Pacquiao losing on points by the end of the fight. I just think
Mm.
um, he's obviously past his prime, and the real question about this fight was not, is he past his prime? He is past his prime. It was more so that, is he in a position where he can really challenge for these titles? Is he at the level where he can still fight at an elite level with a lot of the elite welterweights in the division? or is it that it's really time for him to hang up the gloves and focus on other aspects of his life outside of boxing? And I think if he was to have fought Spence, for example, which was the intended fight for him, and if hypothetically he would won that fight, he might have still decided to retire, to be honest, because there's a lot of rumors that he's going to try and run for president in the Philippines in 2022. This would have been a really good way to end his boxing career and to remind the people of the Philippines that he's a guy who came from rags and went to riches, and he's worked very hard throughout his life, and he's finishing on a high, and that might have propelled his kind of presidential campaign. So instead, obviously, he fights Ugas and loses, and that probably makes it, in my view, even harder for him to continue fighting in boxing, because he's lost to someone who has less of a reputation compared to Spence. I mean, if he lost to Spence, it would have been kind of, I don't know, more seen as more kind of understandable, because Spence is obviously such a dominant welterweight in the division right now. But Ugas just doesn't have that clout, so it doesn't come across as very. It doesn't come across as palatable to the Pacquiao boxing fan. I would say this loss, but I think it just signals the fact that he's obviously past his prime, but I don't think he's at the level where he can fight elite welterweights anymore. He was talking about how his leg. I think I know you'd nodded off to sleep at that point because you had a long live streaming run. But I just hung around
yeah.
extravaganza. I hung around for the post fight interview just in case Pacquiao was actually going to announce his retirement on the spot there and then. But he did mention that, well, I think he initially mentioned that it was quite difficult preparing for a new opponent at such late notice. Completely understandable. But then he also mentioned that he had a lot of tightness in his legs, and I don't really think that's something that you could necessarily fix very quickly. It seems to be a sign that the aging of his body and the fact that he's put his body through so much physical hardship through his boxing career is probably a sign that he's not going to be at his fittest level to continue boxing at an elite level, because of those little nicks in his physical abilities, like the tightness in his legs. And he didn't really show the type of lateral movement that we would have seen of the typical prime Pacquiao back in the day. So I think it's a signal that he should hang up his gloves. Obviously, it's his decision, but I think, for me at least, it was a sign that he should retire. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I don't know whether you should retire or not. In fact, I actually did a poll on my YouTube community tab. I'll share my screen actually so you can see it. I did it, yeah, only about a day ago. So
Yeah.
but there's not a huge amount of votes yet, but so far this is kind of what we've got. So 10 votes, and I gave the options of should he retire, should he continue to fight, should he have a farewell gimme fight in the Philippines, right? Which might be a good way to you were talking about the fact that he is going to be president potentially, or potentially going to run for president. What a way to kind of knock out your competition by knocking out a gimme basically in the Philippines. And it doesn't matter who it is. It could be a journeyman who's got a 1 in 100 record, and the people will digest it in the Philippines because he is a hero there, and rightly so, and he deserves it, right? Like for me, he could do exhibitions as well. So that was another option I put. So should he do just exhibitions now? Like Floyd has done since he kind of has retired as well. That's another option. I think those are the 4 options. Just now, where does he go? Now, for me, should he continue fighting? No. Should he do exhibitions? I mean, it's up to him. But I think with Manny Pacquiao, I think he's always, kind of prided himself on taking on the best of the generation constantly. And he doesn't necessarily want to be taking on, I guess, poor opposition, even in exhibitions. I just feel like for him, like, for example, this is so left field and it probably will never happen, but I can't see him, for example, getting in the ring with Jake Paul. Jake Paul, like they're fighting.
Neither do I.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So like that's
I
happening. That's happening later this week, and I can't see that happening.
but he could potentially. I think it's more likely that he would get in the ring with McGregor than he would with Jake Paul, if that is any kind of distinction
Yeah, I think the issue
between the
is with
two.
McGregor. That was going to happen. I think that was going to
They
happen. The
were
issue was
floating it. They were
no, no.
floating
What
it.
I reckon it was 99.9% done, and then McGregor lost to Poirier. And the issue is that McGregor losing is a big like no, sorry, we're not going to do this now because even though it's a different sport, the traction behind McGregor and also the want to say, oh, hold on, yeah, he's just knocked out Poirier. Yeah, hold on, this guy is back in it. You know, he's back.
Mm,
He's lost like 4 out of his 5 last fights in mixed martial arts and boxing combined. So I think
mm,
he is, unfortunately, now it's calls for him to retire as well. So it wouldn't have been, as you said, right, like palatable to, I think, boxing and UFC fans. I think people would have watched it, but it would have been a lot less. And that's why then we saw the Ryan Garcia Pacquiao thing come
yeah,
out, and then it was
yeah.
like, no, what are you talking about? We haven't discussed that. So it was really weird, and that always happens with the Pacquiao. The only
Mm,
other fight that I can see, and this is only because we talk about fanboys, and we're kind of a little bit of a fanboy for Amir Khan, is Amir Khan fighting
mm,
Pacquiao. So if Amir
that's an
Khan,
interesting fight.
because Amir Khan is going to fight Kell Brook now, if I think that's nearly done. If Amir Khan was to win, which by the way is a big if, I think that's a 50-50 fight at this point in their careers.
Mm,
If Amir Khan was to win that, then why not? Because realistically, Pacquiao is done, and Amir
mm,
Khan is pretty much done as well. Let's be honest; they're
mm,
both pretty much done fighters. Amir Khan's always wanted that fight. It would be a big money fight in the Middle East, where Amir Khan's got a big pool, and Pacquiao is a world global superstar.
yeah,
They'd
yeah.
get a good payday. If they don't want to kind of make it, it could be an exhibition, but I feel like they both want it to be a proper fight. Maybe
Mm.
that's the only fight that I can see. And it would be nice to see Amir Khan finally get one of Mayweather Pacquiao, but it's not really the same, is it, as well? But for me, I think I'm more inclined to say he should either retire or have a farewell gimme fight in the Philippines. Like it can be an exhibition, it can be a pro fight, doesn't really matter, but
Yeah.
one where he's 100% going to win, and it can maybe even instead of being at welterweight, he can be at a higher weight where he doesn't have to kill himself for the weight. Although I know he's small, so welterweight isn't a huge issue to make weight because he's gone through the weights like he has. But
Mm.
I think that would be kind of where I'm at. What about you then? Where have you ended up in terms of choices that you think you should do?
Look, I think all of the choices that you've added to your poll are potential things that he could do. He could continue to fight even professionally in boxing if he wanted to. He just wouldn't be able to fight at the high level that
Mm,
he used to fight at. So it wouldn't be particularly entertaining. He could do
yeah,
exhibitions, and that would make sure that he's not necessarily put in harm's way unnecessarily. Again, I'm not sure how entertaining that would be. And he could have a farewell gimme fight, as you're suggesting, in the Philippines, which I personally don't think would be particularly entertaining either. I don't think any of these options are very entertaining. I think the fights that you've mentioned, otherwise, like for example, if he was to fight McGregor, it wouldn't be a high level fight
no,
necessarily, but it would be entertaining. People would buy it. People would watch it. If he was to fight Khan, it wouldn't. I don't think that would be a high level fight necessarily. Although I think they're certainly in very well known for their speed and boxing ability. So
yeah,
it'd be very interesting in that respect. So it would still be technically a very interesting boxing fight, but it's certainly not going to be considered an elite high level welterweight fight to
no,
watch. It would be very entertaining though. So that
yeah,
would be a
yeah.
very entertaining fight. So
That would
these
be
are
an easy
entertaining
sell.
fights. It'd
Yeah,
be easy sells, but and I totally agree with you. These would be easy sell fights. Heck, even if hypothetically Mayweather decided to somehow come back and there was Pacquiao Mayweather 2, even though the first fight was such a dud, that would be a super entertaining fight for people still to watch because they just want to see it, right? It's a very interesting fight,
mm,
a very interesting matchup to watch. It's really about what Pacquiao wants, and I don't think, you know, I don't really see the reason for Pacquiao to take any of these fights unless he wants to just make a purse out of it and like make money. Like, I don't see any. There's no legacy involved, or doesn't enhance his position in the boxing world if he's taking the Amir Khan fight. In my personal opinion, doesn't enhance his position in the boxing world if he takes a McGregor fight. Doesn't enhance his position in the boxing world if he has a farewell gimme fight in the Philippines either. So at the end of the day, I think he should just pick wherever he decides is the most appropriate thing for him to do. If he wants to make money, then he can take those big, well-known, entertaining fights, but they just won't be high level. If he wants to have a farewell fight in the Philippines, it's not going to be a high-level fight, but it might be useful politically, locally. If he goes to the drawing board with his political consultants in the Philippines and they think it's a good idea for him to knock out someone in the Philippines.
One of the opposition party members.
Well, exactly, yeah. Get one of the opposition party members, have them put on some gloves and watch him knock them out physically. Might have a net gain in the Philippines, for his political campaign. Um, but even that, I actually don't think that would be particularly entertaining. I mean, I would have thought that the people in the Philippines would know that this is just kind of a showy fight to try and enhance his kind of, I don't know, local clout just before his presidential campaign. It might even look embarrassing slightly. I mean, you don't want to. Imagine throwing in with respect some bum in the Philippines and Pacquiao just knocks him out like
I
like
love how you say
ruthlessly.
with respect, some
Why,
bum.
like, why would
So with
anyone
no
want to
respect,
watch
basically.
him? Why would anyone want to watch him knock out some bum in the Philippines? Like,
They would in the
he
Philippines.
fights at a
They
high
would.
level. Would they? Would they?
Yeah,
You'd have to get
100%. Come on, Mohammad.
you'd have to get a member of the Philippines electorate onto this channel in order to fully understand
Mate.
whether they'd want to see him knock out some bum in the Philippines. I mean, say hypothetically, say Boris, yeah. Say Boris had a boxing history and he's like a
Okay.
light heavyweight champion or something, right? And,
More like a super heavyweight champion.
and his elections are coming up. Would you have him in the ring and just like knock out some bum before he starts his campaign? Who wants to see that? No one wants to see this.
But
Like,
yeah,
he fights at a high level. You
the
don't want
problem.
him having this fight.
But the problem is
We
that I
know
can't
he's a
imagine
good
that.
fighter.
Okay, look. Okay, let's say if Boris Johnson is one of the greatest ever boxers. This is such a ridiculous example. Imagine Boris Johnson is one of the. He's the
He's the GOAT.
greatest
He's
ever
the GOAT.
heavyweight. He's basically Muhammad Ali reincarnated, right?
Yeah.
This is Boris Johnson, and he just goes, you know what? I've just finished my career of boxing, and say this is as he's about to run for presidency. Sorry, for prime minister anyway here in the UK, and he goes, as a way to, kind of to attract the people of the UK and show that he's all about knocking out the competitors, and I guess whatever it could be, some kind of slogan, I don't know, but either way he could definitely sell it like 100%. And I think in the Philippines they just clamor towards Pacquiao, and he is seen as this, like, have you seen all the charity work he's done for the Philippines?
No,
He
no,
could
no.
literally he could, I don't know, he could probably walk down the street, punch someone for no reason, and people would be like, that guy's in the wrong. Like, literally, they'll be like, he must have done something wrong.
And look, I mean, Pacquiao's political clout is no doubt very well regarded in the Philippines. I just wonder, his reputation was built on the basis that he had high level fights on the world stage, and for him to have a low level fight in a local context, for me, doesn't really add much to his reputation. His reputation was forged fighting the likes of, the Hattons and the De La Hoyas and all those types of big fighters that he used to fight in the past. So yeah, in my view, I don't think it's necessarily a valuable fight for him to take there either, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, my only thought is it probably makes sense for him to retire unless he wants to make a bit of extra money on the side. 2022 is coming up. He's going to run for president. He's not going to have time to be boxing on the side unless he wants to make some money. He should retire. That's my view.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it might turn into a bit of a circus if he,
Exactly.
starts.
Well, start knocking out all these Filipino bums. Like it just doesn't make sense.
just become part of the
Doesn't make
WWE.
Yeah.
No, but talking of his record, obviously you touched upon it, so I think it's worth going through it. Obviously, at the start of his career, I think he started when he was like 16, 1995. Was he 42 now? Let's do a bit of math. So he would have been 21 in 2000, -6. So he would have, what? So he would have been 15, 16. Wow. So it was 15 when he started out, or potentially, wait, what was it? January? Yeah, 15. Bloody hell. Carnage. Anyway, I thought it was 16, but anyway, yeah, 15 when he started, and obviously he's fighting all these guys.
He's actually, well, according to, I think he was 16 when he fought Edmund Enting.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I was right. Okay, 16. So he's obviously gone through and he's fought all these Filipinos, and actually he took a loss as a 17-year-old. Now, imagine nowadays you take a loss early in your career and that's it. Like you just get discarded. So lucky for him in the sense that he was in that era where it was okay. Look, you can take a loss early. It happens. There was actually a knockout loss as well. You can see here like a lot of KOs now, like just knocking people out left, right, and center. These are all Filipino, Japanese fighter here as well. And then it kind of gets interesting as we get through into the 2000s is where we then start to see some names. So all these names that some people may know, some people may not. But then we know a name that everyone will know or should know. Marco Antonio Barrera. Like, what a fighter. He is one of the greats as well. He was 57-3 at the time, Marco Antonio Barrera, and Pacquiao just the one loss, knocked him out. And that kind of, I think, was the start and the signaling of I'm here. It was in America as well. And it was for the IBF.
Pacquiao had 2 losses, by the way, at that time.
Oh, yeah, 2 losses. Okay.
He lost to a Thai. I think he lost to a Thai fighter in 1999.
Okay, fine. So imagine you've got
very
2
minimal
losses in your record.
Anyway.
Yeah, but imagine, right? But you say that, but nowadays you have 2 losses in your record, and it's hard to come back from them. Like you need a major rebuild. So 2003, which means he would have been 8 plus 16, 24.
Yeah.
Okay, so 24. So that's not super young. Like we've seen people win titles as younger, like Teofimo Lopez, etc. 24 though, knocks out Marco Antonio Barrera. And before that, though, the fight before, he had the IBF World Super Bantamweight title, which he won. Obviously, it looks like here he just relinquished it straight after as a knockout win against an undefeated fighter in Emmanuel Lucero, who I'm not actually super familiar with, I'm being honest with you. But then, this just started then some unbelievable, not just fights, but like trilogies and rivalries, because Juan Manuel Marquez, who's another great, he's 42-2 at the time, both had 2 losses. They fought a unification bout, split decision, draw, so didn't get that. Then he fought Eric Morales, obviously lost that in decision, right? That's another unification. And this is where he's gone from featherweight to super featherweight. Velasquez Morales again knocked him out for the super featherweight title, WBC, for Larios, then Morales. That's the trilogy. He fought Morales 3 times, didn't he? So lost once, 2 knockout wins. And then he fought Marco Antonio Barrera again. So they fought twice. This time it was a unanimous decision win. Juan Manuel Marquez and Eric Morales at the time were just absolute beasts of fighters. So he's obviously had multiple fights in them, split decision win there. And then this is where we get into like legacy stuff when he starts fighting Oscar De La Hoya, right? Beat him. Like really, obviously incredible win. Ricky Hatton knocked him out. At the time, Ricky Hatton, I think, had only lost to Floyd Mayweather. So Ricky Hatton was like, look, and after that fight, I remember Ricky Hatton saying, like, the referee wasn't giving me a fair shake, and I just was an off night. And then he actually was being coached by Floyd Mayweather Sr. for this fight against Pacquiao, and Pacquiao just absolutely dismantled him. Miguel Cotto, what a win there! Like TKO just destroyed
Another
him.
legend.
Yep, another legend. Right at the time, Miguel Cotto only had one loss as well. Antonio Margarito, obviously, right, got done for having stones
Crazy
in
guy.
his gloves. Yeah, ridiculous, right? So he was a cheat, basically, like, and I can say that because that's the truth. And he beat him, unanimous decision, and I think he knocked him down at least once in that fight, if I'm not mistaken. Shane Mosley, another great, like, beat him. One man. Oh my god, how many times did he fight? It was 4 times, wasn't it? 4 times he fought Juan Manuel Marquez. So it was I don't, what's the word instead of trilogy? I don't know, quadrilogy or something. But either way,
really
either
happens,
way,
doesn't it, in boxing?
yeah. But the thing is, it happens. You say that, but nowadays it happens less and less. But when it does happen, it hopefully, you want to see it happen with the big fights, not these. No offense, but these lower level fighters.
Yeah.
So he obviously beat him again, then actually lost to Timothy Bradley, which was a bit of a controversial decision at the time. I think that was a split decision. Timothy Bradley was unbeaten and was a phenomenal fighter. I mean, so good, Timothy Bradley.
Really good boxer, yeah.
Yeah. And then Marquez, obviously, that infamous loss where, there's that picture with him flat on his back.
Horrible.
And no one expected it to happen because he'd beaten Manuel Marquez in close fights, but beaten him, and a huge knockout, and he's just flat on his back. And at that point, I think people were thinking he's done. He's not going to fight again. I know there were actually calls for him to say, look, maybe he should stop. But no, carried on, as has been the case for his whole career. Beat Brandon Rios, good fighter as well. Only one loss at the time. Beat Timothy Bradley in they ran it back, beat him for the welterweight title. So we've gone from featherweight to welterweight. So we've gone all the way through featherweight, super featherweight, lightweight, super lightweight, welterweight, it's carnage. And he actually fought Margarito at super welter, which is light middle. So he's gone as high as light middleweight, which is ridiculous. Beat Timothy Bradley in a rematch. And then Chris Algieri at the time was unbeaten, and he was seen as like the next big thing for America. He's going to be incredible. Beat him. He was a huge prospect at the time. Floyd Mayweather, obviously, in that infamous fight in 2015, losing that. But less said about that, the better, because it was a bit of a dud fight. Let's be honest. It was just him chasing Mayweather around the ring for about 12 rounds. But yeah, I mean, he complained obviously about shoulder injury after, but I think we just got to take it as it is. It's a shame it didn't happen earlier. I know Floyd always says, like, you say that I didn't fight Pacquiao in his prime, but I'm 2 years older than him. But it's a bit different because Floyd didn't decline like Pacquiao did as they got older in terms of like speed and like foot movement. And I think, Floyd Mayweather became more defensive and he kind of aged quite well. And Pacquiao still, obviously, he's competing with the big guys. But if we're talking about the level to compete with Floyd, I think it was that run, before we're talking about this run here, right? When he's beaten Oscar De La Hoya, Ricky Hatton, Miguel Cotto, Margarito, Shane Mosley. It was that.
That was it. That was prime
2008 to 2011.
Yeah.
And they were talking about fighting as well at the time because Mayweather had beaten Hatton and Oscar De La Hoya at the same time as well. So they were they were basically on track to meet, and they just never happened. But it is what it is. Who knows whose fault it is? We'll never know. And Timothy Bradley obviously fought him in a trilogy, beat him. So I got the better of him in the trilogy. Jesse Vargas at the time was a good fighter and is still a good fighter. Beat him. He only had one loss in his record. And Jeff Horn, obviously, controversial one there because a lot of people thought Pacquiao won. Although now I think when people look back at it, they say, well, maybe he did lose that. Who knows? But Jeff Horn, unbeaten at the time, lost. And that was another surprising loss. Yeah. And that was another moment where people just thought, well, maybe it's the end. But no, came back with a knockout against Matisse. Adrian Broner schooled him. Unanimous decision. And then Keith Thurman, right? Knocked him down, Keith Thurman as well, and won that on a split decision. Although a lot of people thought that he won that pretty convincingly. And Keith Thurman was unbeaten at the time and is one of the best welterweights of this generation.
Yeah, definitely. Keith Thurman is not a joke. He was storming through a few years ago.
Yeah, he was.
Hasn't fought in a while.
No, he hasn't fought since the Pacquiao fight.
It's really
So
strange because I mean he was up there in my without
yeah,
digressing from Pacquiao
he
discussions. Like Thurman was really up
yeah.
there in the welterweight
Before
division
Spence
in my
and
mind.
Crawford, so obviously he's beaten Danny Garcia. He beat Porter. He was a
Yeah.
unified champ. He was the man. Then obviously he had a layoff, got injured. Spence kind of came through, beat Brooke. Crawford came up from the lower weight classes, and Thurman unfortunately just lost to Pacquiao, and that's it kind of now. And he's had issues with weight problems, I think, and maybe isn't a huge fan of boxing. So there's a
Mm.
question of what's he going to do next. Who knows? But a very good win for Pacquiao, and obviously the Ugas lost. So that's 72 fights, by the way, for Pacquiao. I mean, what a resume, though.
Yeah, absolutely mad resume, and I you could even think that like his loss to Jeff Horn, and then he goes on to have three victories afterwards in his next three fights, or like his loss against Mayweather, and then he goes on to beat Bradley and Jesse Vargas. You could even see if he did decide to continue to fight, he
Mm,
could potentially win his next two or three fights in a similar pattern. Because has this way of somehow coming back a lot of the
yeah.
time. But
I
you
think
can't
this time
reverse
it's
the fact that
different,
he's
right?
getting older now. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Now
Father time doesn't
yeah. You can't
doesn't wait for
can't bring that
anyone.
back. Exactly. Yeah, you can't necessarily bring that back because he
Yeah.
was younger at the time, and now he's obviously
Yeah.
getting older as every fight progresses. So
But
um
isn't it crazy though that like I think from like 2011 onwards, like pretty much every fight is a fighter we all know in terms of like
yeah.
he's fighting good names. Like it's funny people say that you could split Pacquiao's career in two or three, and you have two or three Hall of Fame fighters like
Mm.
resumes there, and it just shows that he's won. He's actually won world titles. He's been a champion in 4 different decades. Sorry, not 4 different
Weight
decades.
divisions, I assume you're referring
Sorry,
to,
no. What? He's
or are
been a
you talking
champion in
about
eight
something else?
different weight divisions, but decades. I think so. Obviously, he was a champion in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020. So he is, yeah, 4 different decades.
Oh, you're talking about okay, decades. Yeah, yeah, fine.
Yeah, he's been a champion in 4 different decades, which is ridiculous.
2000s. Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, which is incredible, right? So he is a generational talent, and he'll go down as one of the greatest. I'm gonna put you on the spot actually before we
And
wrap
to
up. Go
talk
on.
to talk about the weight divisions though, because I
Hmm,
thought you were talking about that at the time, but no, you're right. Eight weight divisions, isn't it? Which is
ridiculous.
absolutely ridiculous, and that probably is in my view, and I
It's the
don't
highest
know.
ever.
Yeah, exactly.
No, no one's ever done it. No
That's
one's
the
ever
thing
done it.
that really contrasts Pacquiao's legacy to Mayweather's in my view. Don't get me wrong, Mayweather's. Let's not get into a goat discussion. Mayweather's up there in terms of pound for pound
Yeah.
best fighters, right? But Pacquiao, one thing that Mayweather didn't do, and it's understandable because maybe he doesn't have that type of like lower level of height and all that other kind of stuff, and he didn't start off it's really scrawny, like really like slim down. But it really means something to start at such a low weight category and then bring yourself all the way up through the weight divisions and still excel in boxing. And as you mentioned, it's something that no other boxer holds, and that's very important. It certainly, in my view, contrasts him to Mayweather. He beats Mayweather at least on that front, although he doesn't have a undefeated record as Mayweather does. So yeah, something to
Yeah,
note.
yeah, the Mayweather thing, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because apart from really Mayweather and Rocky Marciano, all the
Mm.
greats have lost at some point, and it
Yeah, true.
happens, right? And that's because, and that's not to say that Mayweather didn't dare to be great, because he fought a lot of good champions back to back as well,
He
but
did.
maybe he didn't quite push himself as much as Pacquiao in terms of fighting, six,
Taking
seven, eight,
risks,
nine.
going into deep
Yeah,
waters, fighting people
yeah.
fighting more frequently, not necessarily timing it, and continuing to fight past his
Mm,
prime, and not being afraid of losing. Yeah,
yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it was more kind of carefully thought out, and it was planned by Mayweather. But he's definitely got the I mean, he's undoubtedly he's got the names on the record. It's without a doubt, a shadow of a doubt. But yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot though because it's talking about GOAT debate, and I think I have to just because I think it'll be funny. Where does Pacquiao rank then in terms of GOAT status, Mohammad? Then
Oh, well, then we have to go throughout history, don't we? There's so many great fighters who
well, I mean,
throughout
like
all the different
we're
periods.
talking
Are you
about
talking about modern goats then, in terms of the
no,
last,
I
I
mean
don't know.
we're talking about obviously someone like Muhammad Ali is regarded as one
Exactly, and he
as
obviously
the greatest
fought
ever.
at his own
Yeah,
decade in history, and then you can go even further back, and like Marciano, as you mentioned, he
yeah.
fought a long time ago as well. So
I mean,
he's
actually, rather than saying okay, like where is he like rank wise, in your eyes, is there an argument for Pacquiao to be one a generational great, but
mm,
also a great of all time? Do you think that he has an argument to have? Is there an argument to be had that actually he could be that?
I think there's certainly an argument that he is a generational great. I think that goes without saying. He's certainly a generational great. As for being the greatest of all time, I if you if you look at his progression throughout his boxing career, and you see the fact that he was willing to go up in weights and challenge people at different weight categories, I think that's certainly going to add to his status to being a greatest of all time fighter. I find that maybe I'm a bit too carried away with the losses. Because obviously in his prime he was an amazing fighter, and maybe he carried on for a bit too long in the latter stages of his career, but
Yeah.
that's not something that necessarily would
So
affect
did Muhammad
your.
Ali.
Yeah, that's not.
So Roy
And Muhammad
Jones
Ali
Jr.
sustained
Right?
serious injuries as a result, right? And got
Yeah.
Parkinson's disease and things like
Yeah.
that. So like I was gonna go on to say, which I agree with you. So did other fighters, and so that doesn't necessarily take away his kind of greatest of all time
Legacy.
status
Yeah.
or title. It might even go to show that he was able to carry that skill and his ability even into his later years, which is something that, for example, Floyd might not necessarily have showcased as much, because um, I can't think of Pacquiao without thinking of Floyd, because I just can't personally. Um, so I have to compare the two. But what I want to say is, yeah, totally, he's a generational great. You could make the argument that he's one of the greatest of all
Mm.
time, one of the greatest of all time. I don't think he is the greatest of all time, personally, but I think
So all
he's
the Floyd
certainly
fans
one
don't kill
of
you.
the. He is one of the greatest of all time. I'm talking about Pacquiao here,
Yeah.
not Floyd.
Yeah. No,
Um,
I agree because I think realistically, right, you have people in the debate and people always talk about Muhammad Ali. Floyd Mayweather's in the debate now as well. People do talk about him being the greatest of all time. I think Pacquiao's definitely in there now as well. You've got Roy Jones Jr. You've got some of the obviously the older fighters who, Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard, those guys as well are definitely up in the mix as well. So there's loads of people, of course, that are in there, but everyone has got different opinions on it. But it's just, is Pacquiao rightfully in the debate? And I think he should be rightfully in the debate. Whether you agree that he is the GOAT is a different story, and everyone's got different opinions on it. But I think he's definitely in there. So um, I hope it's interesting to talk about the losses, and I feel like there's more of importance on losses nowadays. But that's because
yeah.
that was Floyd. That was Floyd. He basically said, "Look, I haven't lost, so I'm the best." And that's why a lot of fighters coming through now, they try and pad their records. They try and avoid certain fighters.
Mm,
Early doors, they don't really take risks because they want to keep the O. And
yeah.
it's not, and there's a stigma around losing nowadays, which is a shame, to be honest with you. It's starting,
Mm,
I feel like, to dissipate a little bit in the UK, especially. You'll see like a fighter lose, and they'll run it back, or they'll say,
yeah.
"Look, okay, I'd made a mistake, and I'll have to like reevaluate," and it helps them to improve. So, because the issue with then padding your record or not challenging yourself is that you don't actually look at the flaws in your game, and they're not exposed, so you're not allowed to actually grow in the way that maybe you should. But yeah, anything you want to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I wish Pacquiao the best. Hope he does decide to run for president in 2022, and he has my backing if he needs it.
You don't even know what his like, you know, his
I look forward to him knocking out a bum in the Philippines ahead of his election.
I love how you've got no idea what his political standpoint is going to be, but you're just like, I'll back him because he's a good fighter.
Well, there you go. Well, you wonder whether that's what the Filipino electorate are thinking as well. I mean, because of the fact that he's got such a clout, right? And so it goes to show as well how significant he is as a fighter, in that he motivated an entire country to really get behind him to the extent that he could actually pursue a role in politics, where in another world, in another universe, he would never have had that opportunity to have gotten into politics. And it shows the power of boxing as well. And he's certainly put Philippines on the map. Not to say that the Philippines as a place is famous for other things, but for a lot of people, but for Pacquiao, the Philippines wouldn't be a place that they would know too much about. And Pacquiao has very much put the Philippines on a map, and it's a true show of a fighter and their ability, if they can actually put a certain people or a country on the map by virtue of how successful they have been. So I think that's also one thing to consider in terms of his long and celebrated history in his professional boxing career.
Yeah, he transcends the sport, doesn't he? I think is what has happened, especially in the Philippines, and it shows the influence that these guys, especially elite athletes, can have on a country in terms of helping it get exposure, which is always good. Cool. Thank you very much, Mohammad, for being on as always. And guys, if you haven't already, please do remember to hit the like button to the video, subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't already. We are on the road to 2K subs, and I appreciate everyone who has supported the channel so far. We're getting there. We're getting there. So any help is greatly appreciated. And also, we have now actually joined Patreon as well. So if you do want to get exclusive content, it might be something like potentially me and Mohammad having a boxing match. No, I'm joking. It won't be that. But you do have a say in the content that will be on the channel for some of the tiers on Patreon, call outs, ideas for videos and all other kind of interesting stuff on there. So do check it out. And if it's for you, then fantastic. You can contribute as little as £1 a month. If not, then no worries at all. And enjoy the videos on here. Cool. Thank you very much, guys. I'll see you on the next video. And thank you again, Mohammad. And we will see you. We will definitely be doing a live watch along for the 4th of September, the Zone card. There is also a fight on BT, actually, with Sam Maxwell and Akeem Ennis-Brown on Saturday on BT, which I've interviewed both of them. We will see whether we can do that or not. There's also Anthony Yard on there as well. Lines in the camp, as he always says. And so does Tunde. But we will see whether we do that one as well. Cool. Thank you very much, guys. And see you
everyone.
later.